I think you and I share something very special. But if it's not duplicatable, it could put us at risk. And there is something genuinely...
You gotta think about this.
Come on, there's something wonderful here, right here.
Well, yeah.
The fictitious first day of school that Robin and Kody Brown shot for Sister Wives was not real, not even by a small amount. It was arranged for TLC cameras in every way. Since the moments we see on the show are frequently entirely staged, Michael T. and Tony have publicly stated that they understood how phony it all was when they rewatched the episode. Normally, Kody doesn't prepare his kids for school. He was stumbling through chores he doesn't usually do, which is why he seemed so out of place. He pretended that he needed glasses in order to operate a toaster oven, as if he had no idea how to prepare waffles. Uncomfortably, he referred to his son's school supplies as school equipment. He said something odd about not carrying a phone close to his body. He combed Solomon's hair as if it were his first time. Furthermore, Robin's awakening Ariella wasn't sincere. Ariella was upset because she was reacting to a camera that was thrust in her face first thing in the morning, not because she didn't want to get out of bed. Imagine waking up for school as a child and finding yourself instantly in front of TV cameras rather than in a peaceful or comfortable environment. That was the situation. Welcome to TLC Flicks, your ultimate destination for all things reality, drama, and binge-worthy moments. From shocking twists to behind-the-scenes secrets, however. One example of the health beliefs that Kody and Robin have formed is their comment regarding phones and bodies. Kody and Robin maintain certain highly dubious beliefs regarding health, as stated by Tony and Michael T. and verified by Christine in her book. Christine disclosed that Kody had become deeply involved in conspiracy thinking in recent years, particularly in manosphere-related internet forums. Christine resisted his attempts to persuade her to share his beliefs. This was particularly noticeable during COVID. Like the majority of the film industry, TLC had stringent safety regulations for its crew and actors. To keep everyone on set safe, proof of vaccination was necessary. TLC urged Kody and Robin to be vaccinated, but they refused. Even worse, Kody and Robin changed the story when other family members did receive vaccinations. The vaccinated family members were accused of attempting to spread the virus to them, which is not how infection occurs. In actuality, early vaccinations prevented the spread and saved lives. Christine noted that this was just another pretext for Kody and Robin to remove themselves and rationalize not seeing other people, and that it wasn't even truly about vaccines. Their mistrust of conventional medical procedures doesn't end there. According to Christine, Robin and Kody are typically resistive to contemporary medicine. They would rather stay away from doctors whenever feasible and oppose the use of drugs for mental health issues. Rather, they frequently follow online conspiracies. They have been further drawn into unhealthy patterns as a result of this. Kody even got involved with QAnon, the notorious conspiracy group founded on false allegations at one point. He used QAnon rhetorical catchphrases such as, "Where we go one, we go all." However, as evidenced by documentaries like Question into the Storm, Ron Watkins, who lacked any true insider information, coordinated the entire campaign, which was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Nevertheless, Kody accepted it, and his perspective on his family and his job on the show was shaped by this. This turned into yet another tipping point for Christine. She didn't want to be dragged into plots or made to act as though she agreed with Kody's arguments. It was one of the reasons she finally broke up with him. As a result, although the cameras depicted a responsible, moral father and a loving mother collaborating to raise their kids, the truth was far different. They staged the morning routines. They ignored the health regulations. The dynamics of the family were more influenced by control, justifications, and plotting than by true concern. In actuality, a lot of what fans saw on Sister Wives wasn't based on reality. It was created specifically for television, with a performance overlaying a family that was becoming more and more split, with Robin and Kody turning inward and becoming more distrustful, while others, like Christine, refused to continue living in that reality. The first day of school segment did the exact reverse of what was intended, which was to portray Kody Brown as a competent, involved father. Kody did not come across as confident. Instead, he was clumsy, awkward, and out of place, like a man thrust into a role he was not prepared for. One of the most illuminating scenes was in the kitchen. As though he had never handled either in his life, Kody stood there holding a box of frozen waffles and a toaster oven. He tinkered with the device, glancing at the dials as if he needed to put on his spectacles to see how it operated. It appeared to be a goofy dad moment to anyone casually observing, and perhaps even relatable. However, it was clear to others with more experience, including his own kids, that this was not a man who had prepared school meals. A man was acting here. The pretenses continued after that. Kody struggled over the most basic phrase when he tried to assist his son in getting ready for school. He referred to them as school equipment rather than school supplies. It was such an odd, unnatural statement, one that demonstrated how disconnected he was from the day-to-day realities of parenting school-age children. A father who regularly assisted with mornings would never struggle with such a simple concept. But since he didn't experience that reality, Kody did. Other interactions were affected by the awkwardness. In a strange aside that appeared more about displaying his own views than it did about getting a youngster ready for class, Kody once gave his son a lecture about not keeping a phone close to his body. Then there was Solomon's moment. Kody was seen by the cameras combing his son's hair, which appears to be a loving moment. But his unfamiliarity was evident even in that minor task. He moved rigidly and erratically, as if he were honing a skill instead of carrying out a daily task. It's possible that viewers at home dismissed these peculiarities as a characteristic of Kody's quirky personality. However, Michael T and Tony found it almost funny to watch it happen. Their father wasn't a morning dad, and they were aware of this. Usually, it wasn't him who prepared the children for school. It wasn't reality to see him go through the motions on film. Rather, it was a man performing a poorly written script for the sake of television. In order to show fans that beneath the turmoil, the scandals, and the polygamy, Kody Brown was just another father trying to balance the demands of daily parenting. The scene was designed to humanize him. However, the performance failed because the truth continued to seep through. Rather than being genuine, he appeared to be a fish out of water who had been dumped into a pond in which he had no place. Furthermore, it gets more difficult for viewers to avoid doubting the other scenes once they start to see the flaws in one. How else had the cameras been set up if Kody's morning routine was staged? To what extent was Sister Wives a reality, and to what extent was it really a fantasy? It's possible that Kody's unsuccessful attempts at fatherhood weren't the most disturbing aspect of the first day of school episode. It came from a young girl who was half asleep and a camera that had been in the wrong place. The goal of Robin Brown's piece was to depict a loving motherly moment. In an attempt to gently wake her daughter Ariella for school, she entered her room. It appeared to the audience to be the same old battle that all parents encounter, a drowsy youngster who is hesitant to leave the comfort of bed. As if to demonstrate that, in spite of all the drama of multiple marriages, the Browns were still simply a typical family going about their everyday lives. TLC presented it as charming, even charming. The reality, however, was quite different. Ariella didn't object since she wanted 5 more minutes of sleep. Her refusal to get out of bed had nothing to do with laziness or even her fear of going to school. The true reason she resisted, covered her face, and drew away was straightforward. A camera was staring at her when she opened her eyes. Imagine waking up as a child and seeing a camera lens aimed straight at you instead of your mother's face or the morning sun. A stranger in your room, recording your initial conscious moments. It could feel intrusive to an adult. It may seem perplexing or even terrifying to a child. Ariella was reacting to being filmed during one of her most intimate and sensitive moments of the day, not to her mother. However, TLC removed that fact from the moment through editing. They depicted it as a sweet moment between a loving mother and her drowsy child. The resistance in Ariella's body language and the distress on her face were downplayed and presented as adorable, even humorous. The truth was terrifying to Michael T and Tony, as well as to anyone who dared to look behind the well-written plot. It wasn't family life here. A youngster was being transformed into a character, and her innate emotions were being used for amusement. The question still remains, what effects does it have on kids who are constantly watched? The Brown children had cameras in their faces at graduations, birthday parties, and family arguments for years. However, this instance, a child getting ready for school, captured on camera without their knowledge or consent, showed how far TLC was prepared to go. It also exposed the less positive aspects of Kody and Robin's parenting style. Allowing cameras to enter a child's bedroom and record such delicate moments for broadcast wasn't merely for the sake of telling a tale. It had to do with content over privacy. Furthermore, Ariella's response, withdrawing, covering her face and fending off the intrusion, spoke louder than any pre-written statement could. Ariella wasn't exhausted, and that much was clear. She felt uneasy. Additionally, the cameras revealed everything, regardless of how hard TLC tried to hide it. Ariella's discomfort and Kody's embarrassing school equipment gaffe weren't merely the result of poor behavior or incompetent parenting. They were clues to something more profound, the peculiar, frequently disturbing convictions that shaped Kody and Robyn's worldview. Living with them for years, Christine Brown disclosed that Kody's views on health had changed significantly over time. What began as small eccentricities, such as remarks about phones, food, or habits, gradually developed into a worldview influenced by internet conspiracy theories rather than medical professionals or science. Even the simplest elements revealed it. For example, in the morning scene, Kody warned his son not to carry a phone near him. This would have sounded like an arbitrary, somewhat humorous warning to most parents. But that wasn't a joke in the Brown home. It was a reflection of Kody and Robyn's developing mistrust of commonplace items and their conviction that hidden threats were in places that most families wouldn't consider. Later, Michael T. and Tony would attest that Kody and Robyn had a number of questionable health ideas, the sort that originate from conspiracy films and online forums rather than pediatricians or medical publications. According to Christine, Kody had become very conspiratorial in recent years, immersing himself in online forums that fueled his suspicions and strengthened his mistrust of conventional wisdom. This became a continual source of stress for Christine. She was supposed to participate in the paranoia and not just put up with these views. Kody wanted her to accept his interpretation of the truth, which he gleaned from the most sinister websites. Christine, however, declined. She saw how his diet was hurting him, how it was distorting his thoughts, how it was separating him from his family. Furthermore, this went beyond irrational skepticism of modern life or oddball anxieties about technology. Later on, these concepts would take on very tangible forms, most notably during the COVID-19 epidemic. However, even before then, a concerning trend emerged in Kody and Robyn's health beliefs, a rejection of knowledge, an acceptance of fear, and a readiness to allow conspiracy theories to spread within their household. TLC's portrayal of a happy family, waffles in the kitchen, kids' backpacks arranged, Robyn calming her young charges, hid the truth of what was actually going on behind the scenes. Robyn and Kody were more than just eccentric parents. They were bringing up their kids in a world of false knowledge that was influenced more by conspiracy theories than by medical experts. It was a trend that would extend beyond their day-to-day existence. The family would be split apart. Relationships would be strained. And in the end, it would be among the factors that led Christine to decide to leave. It was impossible to conceal the holes in the Brown family's world when COVID-19 hit. The pandemic was a period of uncertainty, worry, and change for the majority of families. It turned into something more for the Browns, a line of separation that showed how far Robyn and Kody had strayed into conspiracy and distrust. TLC implemented stringent safety procedures to safeguard its actors and staff, just like the rest of the entertainment sector. To ensure the safety of filming, vaccinations, frequent testing, and explicit protocols were necessary. These regulations were put in place to preserve lives. They weren't discretionary. Kody and Robyn, however, refused to comply, although the rest of the family did. It wasn't a quiet or secret rejection. It turned into a weapon. Kody and Robyn blamed the others instead of acknowledging that their choice made them in violation of TLC's regulations. Kody and Robyn accused Janelle and Christine of being hazardous after their children received vaccinations in accordance with medical recommendations and TLC's procedures. They believed that the vaccinated family members were purposefully attempting to infect them rather than defend themselves. The reasoning was reversed. In the early stages of the pandemic, science demonstrated that immunizations prevented the virus from spreading and saved many lives. However, Kody and Robyn were not paying attention to medical professionals or scientists. The echo chambers of online conspiracy forums, which turned facts into fear, were what they were listening to. The family's ties were swiftly ruined by this way of thinking. COVID did not bring the Browns together. Rather, it pushed them more apart. The vaccinated were portrayed as evil. Kody and Robin, who were not vaccinated, presented themselves as victims. Every choice, every visit, and every meeting turned into a battleground. Later on, Christine clarified that the issue with the vaccine wasn't even primarily one of health. It was a pretext. It appeared to her that Kody and Robin were using it as yet another excuse to alienate themselves from the rest of the family and to keep them apart. Their divisions were revealed by the pandemic, not created. The reality was much more nuanced. Even though TLC portrayed the Browns as a family dealing with the same problems as everyone else, masks, quarantine, and safety, Kody preached on camera about keeping the family safe and according to CDC regulations. He and Robin were completely breaking the rules off camera. They were establishing their own, based on misinformation and distrust. There was more to the COVID division than a dispute over science. It began to represent the more profound division inside the family, a conflict between those who held to suspicion, justifications, and fear and those who chose cooperation, trust, and reality. It was a means for Robin and Kody to keep themselves separate. For Christine, it was yet more indication that her marriage was irreparably failing, as was the appearance of a cohesive family. Christine claims that although the pandemic exposed the Browns' differences, the conflict wasn't really about CDC regulations, masks, or vaccines. Those were only superficial arguments. The underlying trend was consistently the same. Robin and Kody looked for excuses to keep themselves separate from the rest of the family, and COVID turned into the best one. At first, it was subtle. They asserted that the restrictions were in place for everyone's safety and that distance was essential. However, the discrepancies were clear. Although they gave safety lectures to others, they did not abide by the same guidelines. They weren't following TLC's procedures, they weren't paying attention to medical professionals, and their idea of safety changed based on the circumstance. Separation was the result that never changed. Every new rule turned into an additional barrier. The other spouses and their kids were charged with recklessness if they heeded the medical advice. They were charged with putting Robin's kids in risk if they didn't. Kody and Robin always had an excuse to close the door, regardless of what anyone else did. Christine was able to see through it. She clarified in her book and interviews that the epidemic was really a front. The underlying reality was that Kody and Robin no longer wanted to maintain ties to their extended family, without acknowledging the true reason that they didn't want to share their lives, their kids, or their time. COVID provided them with the ideal excuse to withdraw and isolate. The excuses became tiresome for the rest of the family. There was blame rather than collaboration. Suspicion prevailed over compromise. Every family get-together, holiday, and significant occasion turned into a chance for Kody and Robin to justify their absence, their inability to take the chance, and their necessity of remaining apart. Originally presented as a health concern, it now appeared to be about control. Kody and Robin managed the dynamics of the family by dictating the terms of interaction. They made decisions about who was reliable enough to be around them, when visits were permitted, and when it was safe. And no one else was able to win because their rules didn't correspond with reality. It was exhausting for Christine. She had seen Kody's increasing seclusion for years, but during COVID, she came to the conclusion that the trend was unchangeable. The justifications weren't short-term. They have nothing to do with a virus. Avoidance was the focus, and the seclusion was irreversible. It was actually a story about distance that TLC reframed into a plot about a watchful parent defending his family, one excuse at a time regarding the construction of walls. And it was hard for Christine to ignore those walls. Kody and Robin's suspicion of conventional health advice went well beyond pandemic regulations and vaccinations. Christine Brown disclosed that their skepticism was a pattern that characterized their attitude to almost every facet of health and wellness, rather than being restricted to a single problem. They resisted medical professionals, drugs, and even simple mental health treatment. When problems emerged, Kody and Robin turned to internet resources and conspiracy forums instead of the specialists or experts that normal families would consult. According to Christine, they are essentially against modern medicine and are not open to treatments that could enhance their own and their children's well-being. This rejection showed up in little but impactful ways. Suspicion influenced decisions regarding routine checks, doctor appointments, and mental health care. There was hesitancy or outright rejection of even modest medical operations. Professional advice was less important to Kody and Robin than what they read in online forums or videos. Unverified statements were given the status of gospel, while information from reliable sources was disregarded or ignored. Christine witnessed the fallout directly. In Kody and Robin's perspective, children and family members who were receptive to contemporary medical treatment abruptly became the problem. It was reframed as disloyalty or even an attempt to hurt them to follow professional advice. Kody and Robin further isolated themselves by framing the family's obedience to medical advice as threatening and portraying the members who had received vaccinations, medications, or medical advice as enemies. Their position influenced the atmosphere in the home and wasn't just a personal issue. The kids were growing up in a culture that normalized disinformation and mistrust of experts. Tension and confusion were caused by the subtle influence of fear and paranoia on day-to-day decisions. Christine observed that because the baseline perception of reality was being warped, it was challenging for any member of the family to discern what was safe, healthy, or accurate in this setting. Kody's increasing fixation with conspiracies was further fueled by his rejection of medical treatment and professional advice. Kody and Robin made room for alternate narratives, which were not only dubious but also harmful, by rejecting common wisdom. Misinformation and distrust were now permeating the family's everyday activities, conversations, and even what was broadcast on Sister Wives. For Christine, this was a watershed moment. Although she had previously put up with oddities and arguments, the family was at risk both physically and emotionally when she refused to confront the facts about health issues. The household's fissures were becoming more than small. They were growing into unavoidable chasms. In reality, the family that viewers saw on television, one that appeared orderly, compassionate, and wholesome, was governed by mistrust and terror. The facade of Sister Wives concealed a much more disturbing reality, and Kody and Robin's rejection of modern medicine was just one example. Health and vaccinations weren't the only things that contributed to Kody Brown's decline into conspiracy beliefs. He became actively involved in the realm of QAnon, the infamous internet movement founded on secrecy, terror, and false allegations, according to Christine Brown. His initial mistrust of popular information had developed into a full-fledged obsession that affected his perspective on the world and his family. Kody repeated lines like, "Where we go one, we go all," embracing the movement's rhetoric and chants. It might have appeared to be a harmless online curiosity or a casual infatuation to outsiders. Christine, however, recognized the reality. Kody was intentionally influencing his relationships and behavior by entangling himself in a web of false information. For him, QAnon served as a prism through which he viewed the world, not merely a collection of concepts. For those who were not familiar, QAnon was portrayed as a movement that uncovered covert schemes by influential people. In actuality, it was a made-up story that was arranged by a man by the name of Ron Watkins and had nothing to do with any actual conspiracies. Investigative work revealed the movement to be wholly fake, a show of smoke and mirrors with no foundation in reality, most notably in Cullen Hoback's documentary Question Into the Storm. However, Kody was not particularly affected by the facts. He was already devoted to the philosophy. The fixation left the internet. His family life was affected. This conspiratorial mindset influenced choices concerning education, relationships with family, and following safety procedures. People who didn't agree with him, like Christine, the other spouses, and even the kids, were seen as dangerous or unreliable. In addition to being intellectual, the split became practical and emotional, influencing Kody's decision about who he would let close to him and his family. The effect was corrosive, according to Christine. Kody became distrustful, reactive, and inflexible as a result of his ongoing exposure to conspiracy theories. She was also under a lot of pressure since she wouldn't believe the lies he propagated. Once a place of cooperative family life and negotiated co-parenting, their shared home turned into a battlefield of conflicting realities. Additionally, Kody's fascination with QAnon revealed a more significant trend in his actions. Isolation, control, and responsibility deflection were justified by conspiracies. External authorities were portrayed as adversaries whenever they were engaged, whether they were the CDC, medical professionals, or TLC's production guidelines. He filtered all of the popular advice via the worldview he had learned online. This aspect of reality was concealed from Sister Wives' audience. Kody kept playing the parts of husband, father, and patriarch of the family on camera. Off camera, his interactions with his wives, kids, and even the production crew were governed by a world of false information and paranoia. This was identified by Christine as a crucial point of fracture. Kody's involvement with QAnon was more than just a passing interest. It became a way of life. She saw it as a clear indication that the man she had married and the father of her children was no longer completely present in the family's shared reality. On TV, Sister Wives maintained their facade. But behind the scenes, distrust had taken the place of trust, ideology had taken the place of intimacy, and conspiracy had replaced connection. Christine Brown spent years attempting to make sense of the world that Kody and Robin had built, one that was becoming more and more influenced by conspiracy theories, manufactured reality, and paranoia. However, as Kody's convictions grew stronger, Christine came to the conclusion that there was no way to compromise. The insistence on solitude, the disregard of medical advice, and the QAnon fixation were not insignificant eccentricities or innocuous personal decisions. They were profoundly influencing the dynamics of the family, the home, and the kids. Christine was being pushed to live in a reality she knew was untrue, not just to accept these ideas, but to actively engage in them. The pressure increased daily. Tension, distrust, and false information weighed heavily on every encounter. She made an effort to maintain some sort of routine for the kids, to set boundaries, and to use reason. However, there was little opportunity for compromise because of Kody's obsession with controlling the family's surroundings and his involvement in conspiracies. His distorted perspective influenced choices regarding health, education, and even fundamental family relationships. Christine's voice, which is based on facts, empathy, and reality, frequently felt muffled in this setting. It was the pattern they established, not just the conspiracy's heresy. To keep control and at a safe distance, Kody and Robin used distrust and fear as tools. Online ideas, safety procedures, and vaccines all served as excuses to isolate, withdraw, and impose their own interpretation of reality. No matter what she did or said, Christine knew that the walls would only get higher. The realization that her involvement would include letting go of her own values and embracing a worldview she knew to be untrue was the tipping point. She could no longer allow Kody to manipulate trust, twist reality, and force these ideas on the kids with no repercussions. It was not only annoying or uncomfortable, it was also emotionally taxing and unsustainable. Christine did not make her departure on a whim. It was the result of years of seeing the hard truth of Kody's transformation clash with the false image of family life. She retreated to safeguard her integrity, her children, and herself, not because she was malicious. The Brown family's harmonic, loving, and cohesive portrayal on Sister Wives was not at all accurate. Christine saw a home shattered by distrust, false information, and ideological fixation behind the cameras. Her resignation was a disclosure of the deeper dysfunction concealed beneath the polished TV facade, not just a personal decision. Christine made a message by leaving. The need for reality, trust, and emotional safety in a family cannot be replaced by a show, a plot, or control. Viewers of Sister Wives were promised a close-up look at the lives of multiple families. It promoted the concepts of openness, love, and a family negotiating difficult connections in the contemporary world. However, the truth behind the cameras was rather different. The Browns' well-preserved facade, which included the kids laughing together, Robin as a caring mother, and Kody as an involved father, concealed a much darker reality. With its waffles, hair combing, and morning rituals, the so-called first day of school scenario was meticulously planned. Every phrase and movement was influenced by retakes, scripts, and cameras. An illusion created to amuse and captivate viewers. What seemed to be an unguarded look into family life was actually a play. The Browns were posing as though they lived a different world than they actually did, not merely to please the audience. The familial dynamic was broken off camera. Tension and division were brought about by Kody's involvement in conspiracies, disregard for medical advice, and reliance on false information found online. Robin, who participated in many of the fabricated events, contributed to the family's estrangement from one another by endorsing the conspiratorial ideas. Fear and mistrust were used to filter even seemingly little decisions, such as those pertaining to daily routines, health, or education, rather than love or reason. From Christine's point of view, the actual expense of the facade became apparent. The fabricated television scenes were only the beginning. Beneath the exterior, there was a family living in two different worlds, one created for the cameras, one influenced by false information and paranoia. Youngsters were exposed to fake scenarios, fake lessons, and beliefs that were based on fear rather than logic. The adults in the house were living in a different, frequently skewed reality while playing roles. Sister Wives was a multi-layered mask. It displayed peace, tenderness, and familial loyalty on television. Behind the scenes, it concealed emotional manipulation, ideological fixation, and seclusion. While the family itself battled broken trust and invisible walls, the show produced a story that viewers could easily follow. In the end, the Brown story was about more than simply polygamy and reality TV. It dealt with the human cost of performance, control, and false information. It was about children trapped in the middle of a performance they didn't choose, a mother who refused to compromise her values, and a father who lost his sense of reality. The well-groomed TV family was a facade. Behind it was the real family, unseen, untelevised, and all too real, with all its conflicts, plots, and divisions. And that's the real narrative of Sister Wives, a family acting for the cameras as the real world silently fell apart in the background. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks everyone.